In all of our conversations, it occurs to me that I've never actually sat down and shown you what a ISP's network looks like to an engineer, an architect, or an operator who's running the thing. And I thought it was time to correct that. So tonight, what I'm going to show you is a piece of software that I've had a hand in helping with. It's kind of what I do now is my, not really my day job, but as one function of my day job. And I need to make clear before I show you this that the data I'm showing you is a fake network. It's a tool we use for debugging, demonstrations, etc. Absolutely nothing you're going to see tonight actually exists in the real world. However, what you're going to see tonight is of a high enough quality that it is used in demonstrating this software package to literally the largest ISPs on the planet. Take a look here at the software package, and I've actually never done one of these split screens before, so you're going to have to forgive me if I'm awful at it, but I'll do my best when I'm explaining something to kind of look over at you. But this is a little complex, so unfortunately I'm going to need to look at the screen during this demonstration. As you can see, we're looking at a European network here. This network consists of optical circuits and IP circuits. The white lines are the optical paths, and the blue lines are the what we call the layer 3 paths, or the IP paths. You can see some of the white lines are represented by just straight lines, like down in the Mediterranean. There's no path to them at all. Those would be lines, those would be fiber paths that we don't have geographic information on, or lat long paths, what we normally call geocoordinates or geospatial data. The white lines that do have squiggles in them, and I'll go ahead and just pick an area here and zoom in. These represent optical paths that we do have information on. And if I swap this over to the geographic view, we can actually scroll in and see where the fiber goes under the ground. Okay. I'm going to, for the moment, switch back to this map view because it's cleaner. In all network operation software packages, red means bad. So obviously, ironically, and I swear this was not intended, this map has existed for 5 or 6 years since we built it. All of the links between Ukraine and Russia are down. I swear this is not a political statement. I actually just noticed that for the first time, and I will be fixing that before we go before another customer. So what we have here is 2 layers of a network. It's relatively complex, but it's fairly easy to understand. What I really want to convey in this short conversation here is the complexity that hides under the hood. So let's take a look at this circuit that that goes, I believe, is that Paris? Yes, from Paris to Barcelona. And if I select this circuit, we get some information here. Now, these are logical links. I'm not going to get into all of the details, but this would be what's called an IGP adjacency. So if you've ever done a trace route, this is one of the hops that trace route goes over. And if we go up another level, there is an LSP, which in the case of an LSP, that is a long path that connects two routers. Really, it's a logical connection between two routers on the network. Uh, we are not going to focus on that today. That is way too advanced for the purpose of this conversation. So we are going to take a look at this IGP interface, and I want to show you the path. This is really kind of the goal of this video. What I want to convey is a lot of people know about the OSI model. That's the 7 layers of networking. What is often missed is that those 7 layers often have many layers within them. So what you're looking at here represents the first 3 layers of the OSI model. We go from a piece of fiber in the ground, which you can see represented here on the far right. That goes up through the optical infrastructure and all of these connections up until you get to this Ethernet port would be in the optical vein. So these are, optical circuits. The OCH is that wavelength we talked about. Remember in the dispersion conversation, we talked about how the MUX puts a bunch of wavelengths onto a single piece of fiber to transmit, and it bounces off the side. Well, this represents one of those wavelengths. So this here would be, in most networks today, a 100 gig circuit. And these would be the way traffic is aggregated onto that 100 gig circuit. The Ethernet is the connection between the optical equipment and the IP equipment. There's then the physical interface, which is what that Ethernet port, what that Ethernet cable, or in this case fiber, is connected into. There's the logical, which is where the IP address exists. And then there's the IGP, which is how the routers exchange routing information between them. And all of these have to work together end to end to constitute a circuit. So when you see one hop in a trace route, what you're actually seeing is this line here. The very first line on the left is the IGP. That's the forwarding path for the traffic. There can be other layers on top of that, but again, I think I'm already getting way down in the weeds here. I'm trying to keep this approachable, but it is a concept It is a complicated topic. So if you followed all this, then great. Let me take a step back for a moment for those of you who might not be following. What we're looking at here is all of the information in terms of how traffic is carried when it leaves a router and it goes across some pieces of fiber, right? So all of this stack, all the way down to the fiber, is 2 devices that are connected to each other. So the first ones here, CR1 BCN, are the router, quote unquote. The second device here is what we call a ROADM. And that's just a fancy way of saying a light switch, right? It's the thing that manages the light. And then it hits the fiber and it goes through and it hits these are those amplifiers I was talking about that regen the signal and clean it up. So fiber, amplifier, fiber, all the way down. Then we come up and this is where it hits another ROADM at another site, goes back out that site via what we call degrees. So it comes in on one side of the ROADM. The media channel is then switched, isn't the right term, but it's the closest I can get, switched to another ROADM degree, which is going further and further. And then at the other end, we call it surfacing. The traffic comes off the last piece of fiber, goes into the ROADM at the destination side, goes through all these different protocol layers. So at each one of these, the structure is changing. We're basically unwrapping the Russian dolls here, right? The actual IP packet doesn't emerge from the data that's coming across this until we get to the logical interface, basically. Okay, so it gets wrapped in first Ethernet, then it gets taken out of that Ethernet frame and put into an optical data unit. Then it gets put into the optical channel. It goes through media channels down to the optical transport service, down to the fiber, bounces all around until it gets where it's going, and then it pops back out the other side. And again, the reason I wanted to walk through this with you is that in everything we've talked about, I've never given people that high level view, right? What is a network? And this is the best way I could think to do it. It's probably not the easiest thing to understand. It takes a very special, twisted kind of mind to find beauty in this. But I do. Understanding this complexity that underlies everything we do online is glorious to me. So I wanted to share that. I really hope that this has given some value and that you can understand when I'm talking latency, the conversation we had was about the light, right? So it goes from an ILA through a piece of fiber to a ROADM. Effectively, that's that entire latency part of the conversation that we were having. Just assumes that all of these steps are happening in those microseconds, right? From that prior video, to get from the light coming into the box to the Ethernet signal that comes out of the ROADM to the router. It's a whole lot of complexity and a whole lot of steps that happen in sub 100 microseconds, not even a millisecond, right? It would take 10 hops all the way where it's surfacing all the way to the Ethernet to equal 1 millisecond. So it's not so much the latency that network engineers like myself fear. It's the complexity of these stacked services. And we're only going up to layer 3 here. On top of layer 3, you have everything else like the TCP connection, the UDP connection. Then inside of those, they have different protocols that are running. This onion of routing traffic is not easy, but we've gotten very, very good at it. In general, you'll never need to know what I've just shown you. There's no reason for anyone but someone like me to know this. I just felt it was kind of important to walk through this with you, to show you what a regional, in the US, this would constitute a very, very small regional network. Even in Europe, this is a really small European backbone, right? I mean, if we talk Vodafone or any of Deutsche Telekom, this would be a maybe 2% of the network they have existing within Europe. The scope of this would be roughly the eastern side of the US, and this would again be 2% of half of Verizon's network. So this might represent less than 1% of the overall infrastructure just in the Verizon domestic network, or 2 to 3% of like Deutsche Telekom, for instance, in their European network. Um, yeah, so that's it. I don't know if you guys are actually going to find any value in this, but it occurred to me that for my own OCD-ness, I should complete this story a little bit and just kind of show you some of what a network looks like at the end of the day. And when I'm talking about these different pieces, I just wanted to give you a mental picture that you could plug in the conversations that we have. And frankly, if any of you are still interested in going further, I would be shocked and gratified. But I would not expect that the vast majority of you would find content like this especially interesting. So I hope you'll forgive me for the somewhat rambling nature of this. It was unplanned. It was something I came up with just a little bit ago when I had the realization. So let me know what you think in the comments. Please like if you did enjoy this. Ask questions in the comments if you want me to dive in, any further. Maybe a more structured call that goes through this. Or sorry, that's my day job hitting in. Maybe a more structured video that goes more into the details, step by step, all the way through a network, do the life of a packet across the network, that sort of thing. That really is what I do for a living. So feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to share, but I don't want to assume, because this is getting way down in the weeds at this point. If you like this content, or if you are willing to put up with me for the rest of my content, please feel free to subscribe. I really appreciate the time tonight, and I hope you all have a fantastic one.